Thank you, everyone. Welcome for coming tonight. I'm Zoe Strecker, and I'm an art professor here at Transylvania, and I'm also the director of our Creative Intelligence series. And this event tonight is our very last Creative Intelligence event for the academic year. So I really appreciate you all being here. And we have a really special guest this evening, and we'll have an hour or so all together to enjoy hearing her talk and to have a conversation with her at the end. I do want to call a few little things to your attention. One is that we have closed captioning. If you need that, you can just access this from the bottom of the screen. You'll see it says live transcript, and that is there. Also, you'll see that we have a question and answer box, and you're welcome to type questions into that box at any point during the talk tonight. And then as we get toward the end, we're going to have a conversation together, and those questions will feed and direct our conversation. So feel free to type them anytime, and know that we're going to get to those at the very end this evening. So by introduction, I want to say that last summer, as you all are aware, we were in a dynamic phase of racial justice demonstrations, and the nation was engaged in fraught but meaningful conversations around many things, as we are currently, but including around public monuments last summer that commemorate Confederate figures. Activists were toppling them, and cities began making plans to relocate controversial ones, sometimes in the dead of night, to avoid other public conflict. And for me, some of the most important questions are about who gets to make the decisions about the monuments. So when I read this startling and powerful opinion piece in the New York Times by a Southern writer named Randall Williams in June, I immediately wanted to know more, and whether she might even have this conversation with us at Transylvania. And as I learned about Caroline, I found that she had engaged in conversations across time with William Shakespeare in her book, Lucy Negro Redux. And then she collaborated and shared conversations with the dance troupe, a ballet company, to explore her literary work and other modalities in the written. And then also this wonderful lifelong conversation she has with her own mother and the women in her family and extended community around food and gathering and meals. And I really admire that and welcome this breadth of activity in a writer and scholar. And Caroline Randall Williams is certainly a scholar. She was educated at both Harvard and Oxford, and currently she's the writer in residence at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. So we are so fortunate to have her here this evening to read her work and discuss it, and then take conversations and have take questions and have a conversation with you in the audience. And like I said, please post your questions, and we'll get to this toward the end. So please join me now in welcoming Caroline Randall Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Zoe, I have to say that introduction was poignant to me in ways that I'm not sure I've had such a poignant introduction. And it had brevity, which I love. It was brief and also to the bone in the best way. So thank you very, very much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be with you all this evening. I'm overcome with emotion to get to talk with young thinking people on a night like tonight, on a week like this week, in a chapter of history like this chapter of history. And I might be a bit extemporaneous at the end of this talk and engage with some questions like that with you all at the end. But I will start by just telling you that it is a privilege of my life that I get to be a part of conversations like this right now. I like to think lately that it's kind of a riff on that Hamilton effect, when he says the world turned its back on me and I wrote my way out. And I think maybe I've written my way in right now. And that feels right. This whole conversation about justice in this moment, it comes down to the predicament of what to do when what's written into law and what's truly just are two different things. It's funny, or tragic, or complicated, and I will let you know when I've figured out the right word, and I will put it in a book probably. It's funny, or tragic, or complicated that this is the same grievance that the founding fathers raised when they broke with England. King George's restrictions might have been legal, but the men who founded America found those laws unjust. So they sought freedom. Then, upon gaining their independence, they turned around and did that terribly human thing. They recreated a cycle of abuse and oppression in their own house. Now, today, we are about the business of dealing with that truth. This is complicated for me for so many reasons. Maybe because, for going along with the house metaphor, I am figuratively recreating the role of my ancestresses. I am come to clean the house of the oppressor. If that makes you uncomfortable, well, maybe it should. In some large part, Zoe said, I was invited here because of an article I wrote about my discomforting history. And I wrote it really as a call that wants a response. It's a part of a conversation. And so I'm going to share it with you here. You want a Confederate monument? My body is a Confederate monument. I have rape-colored skin. My light brown blackness is a living testament to the rules, the practices, the causes of the Old South. If there are those who want to remember the legacy of the Confederacy, if they want monuments, well then my body is a monument. My skin is a monument. Dead Confederates are honored all over this country with cartoonish private statues, solemn public monuments, and even in the names of United States Army bases. It fortifies and heartens me to witness the protests against this practice and the glowing clamor from serious, nonpartisan public servants to redress it. But there are still those who cannot understand the difference between rewriting and reframing the past. I say it is not a matter of airbrushing history, but of adding a new perspective. I am a Black Southern woman and of my immediate white male ancestors. All of them were rapists. My very existence is a relic of slavery and Jim Crow. According to the rule of hypodescent, the social and legal practice of assigning a genetically mixed race person to the race with less social power, I am the daughter of 2 Black people, the granddaughter of 4 Black people, the great-granddaughter of 8 Black people. Go back one more generation and it gets less straightforward and more sinister. As far as family history has always told, and as modern DNA testing has allowed me to confirm, I am the great-great-granddaughter of Black women who are domestic servants and white men who raped their help. It is an extraordinary truth of my life that I am biologically more than half white, and yet I have no white people in my genealogy in living memory. No voluntary whiteness. I am biologically more than half white, and none of it was consensual. White Southern men, my ancestors, took what they wanted from women they did not love, over whom they had extraordinary power, and then failed to claim their children. What is a monument but a standing memory? An artifact to make tangible the truth of the past. My body and blood are a tangible truth of the South and its past. The Black people I come from were owned and by the white people I come from. The white people I come from fought and died for their lost cause. And I ask you now, who dares to tell me to celebrate them? Who dares to ask me to accept their mounted pedestals? You cannot dismiss me as someone who doesn't understand. You cannot say it wasn't my family members who fought and died. My Blackness does not put me on the other side of anything. It puts me squarely at the heart of the debate. I don't just come from the South. I come from Confederates. I've got high-ranking rebel gray blue blood coursing my veins. So I am not an outsider who makes these demands. I am descended from Edmund Pettus, a Confederate general, leader of the Ku Klux Klan, named after the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So I'm not an outsider who makes these demands. I'm a great-great-granddaughter. And here I'm called to say that there is much about the South that is precious to me. I do my best teaching and writing here. There is, however, a peculiar model of Southern pride that must now, at long last, be reckoned with. This is not an ignorant pride, but a defiant one. It is a pride that says, our history is rich. Our causes are justified. Our ancestors lie beyond reproach. It's a pining for a certain greatness, if you will. A wish again for a certain kind of American memory. A monument-worthy memory. But here's the thing. Our ancestors don't deserve your unconditional pride. Yes, I am proud of every one of my Black ancestors who survived slavery. They earned that pride by any decent person's reckoning. But I am not proud of the white ancestors whom I know, by virtue of my very existence, to be bad actors. Among the apologists for the Southern cause and for its monuments, there are those who dismiss the hardships of the past. They imagine a world of benevolent masters and speak with misty eyes of gentility and honor in the land. They deny plantation rape, or explain it away, or question the degree of frequency with which it occurred. To those people, it is my privilege to say, I am proof. I am proof that whatever else the South might have been, or might believe itself to be, it was and is a space whose prosperity and sense of romance and nostalgia were built upon the grievous exploitation of Black life. The dream version of the Old South never existed. Any manufactured monument to that time in that place tells half a truth at best. The ideas and ideals it purports to honor are not real. To those who have embraced these delusions, now is the time to re-examine your position. Either you've been blind to a truth that my body's story forces you to see, or you really do mean to honor the oppressor at the expense of the oppressed, and you must at last acknowledge your emotional investment in a legacy of hate. Either way, I say the monuments of stone and metal, the monuments of cloth and wood, all the man-made monuments must come down. I defy any sentimental Southerner to defend our ancestors to me. I'm quite literally made of the reasons to strip them of their laurels. Now, first, thank you for sharing the time listening to that testimony with me. On the other side of it, the question becomes, what does justice look like for a grievance so old and yet so present? There cannot be a statute of limitations for inherited trauma, especially not when we're still living in the reverberations and new iterations of that trauma. I lived in Mississippi for 5 of the best and most complicated years of my life. After George Floyd's murder, had been thinking a lot about Emmett Till. In the wake of the past few days, that's only become more true. The South, but especially Mississippi, is maybe the only place on earth where I never felt gaslit when I talked about the trouble with the idea of America, the divide between the reality of it and the dream of it. Because down here in the South, down in Mississippi, it's as plain as the train tracks that still divide half of any Delta town from another, the student bodies of any white flight academy from their defunded public counterparts. The South is the only place where a white person has called me a nigger to my face without fear or trepidation, not out of a speeding car, but in shared space, and neither of us planning to leave the room before or after the exchange. Mississippi is the reason that the man brandishing the Confederate battle flag in the Capitol on January 6th was not actually any kind of history maker. I refuse to dignify him with that superlative for many reasons, but beyond anything else, the Magnolia State made sure that fraught battle flag flew every day in the Capitol, till they finally did the right thing and wiped the symbol of hate away with a resilient magnolia bloom this past November. The South fills me with wonder because it's the best and worst of this country all the time. And there's no way to hide from either side of it. The terrible systemic iniquities, the ridiculous weather, the living things that will consume the house from under you, the relative lawlessness in some parts that means any back road in Mississippi is a chaos highway for good or ill. And here's my favorite touch. In the deep South, so much of the human wrought best parts, the music, the food, the good history, the hard work, the cadences, and the triumphant transcendence from trauma. Well, it's all very Black, isn't it? And God help me, I love it for that too. I spent a lot of my life, certainly my professional life as a writer, working to reframe things, not rewrite them, but revisit them that we might understand them better. It's the work of remembering. And again, not redefining, but explaining definitions. Open any decent dictionary, and most of the best words have more than one meaning. Just think. It's wild the way the word share in its verb form means both to divide and to tell, to give away something for someone else, and to share your piece, and to say your piece. There are so many ways to share the truth. Here's one of mine. I was born on August 24th, 1987. 32 years before I was born, to the day, Emmett Till walked into Bryant's grocery store and had an exchange that would ultimately end his life. 32 years to the day. I still can't get over that somehow. And the words I've got to say next: collective memory, anniversaries, epigenetics, justice, inherited trauma, the way the land holds hard stories like DNA does. What was the world remembering? What were Black mothers remembering? What sighs was the South heaving in memorial and grief on the day I landed here? I'm something obsessed with how we remember, and I think that's got to be a part of this. Here, let me tell it another way. I don't know how to feel like I deserve to be a part of these conversations. What I mean to say is I don't know how to share my story alongside someone like Emmett Till's. I guess I know that the point has got to be the bearing witness, the seeking of justice. I'm trying to be a credible messenger. I lived at 514 Grand Boulevard in Greenwood, Mississippi for 2 years, straight out of college. If I took a right out of my driveway and carried on down the boulevard till it crossed the little bridge over the Tallahatchie River, it turned into one of those classic Delta highways that always seem to me to be some bright lit, vacant intersection of life and death all the time. Keep driving and you'd pass the Tallahatchie Flats, a social space with decorative shacks and curated antique plows. Grim reminders of how cheerfully erasure is undertaken in the name of Southern hospitality. But that's not the story I'm here to tell tonight. The story I'm here to tell tonight is about the first time I kept driving down Money Road. I was 22 and full of fear and wonder at my new home, and still had something of the voyeur adventurer about me. Cotton field, how wild. Endless corn, how wild. Beans, more cotton, wild again. Look at this place. And then I got to a stretch of road by the tracks that looked, well, it looked like something out of Deep South, don't know better whimsy. I was thinking of the Kathy Bates parts of Fried Green Tomatoes, a stretch of road that used to be a place where lives were lived. I've always been called to what's haunted, but this wasn't a familiar strain of ghost. I parked and got out of the car. I'd seen something, some ancient thing, some vine-covered relic that touched the romantic parts of my mind. So I got out to look, thinking of Iggy and Ruth and other silly white revisionist shit that years of living in the Delta would free me from. I got out and I walked closer and I saw the remains of Brian's grocery store. Now, you must remember, I was standing on the far end of the street where I paid white people to live. Grand Boulevard, Money Road. I took a couple of steps back and I threw up where I stood. And I got in my car and I never drove back there. A couple of months later, I spent August 24th, 2010, waking and sleeping on the same street where 55 years before Emmett Till spent his last day as an unmarked boy. On the same street where Emmett Till spent his last day as a marked man. I still don't know what words are enough to honor him and his legacy. Honor Mamie Till and her broken heart. Honor simply a boy who ought to have lived. In the South, we know that places have memories. We know that the land is a soul-filled thing. I think then the thing that struck me most was that there was no marker, no monument. Every day I drove to teach school from 2010 to 2012, I drove down Emmett Till Memorial Highway. No context, no explanation, no acknowledgement of the crazy-making, terrible, bloody legacy of how that stretch of pavement got its name. But at least there was a sign. Yet there in Money, Mississippi, nothing. No warning, no dignifying of the ground, no moment of claiming the shame, no monument, no justice. It was the slinking, cowardly shame of anyone who runs and then lies about what they've done, not the owning, productive shame that drags itself into the light and seeks to begin anew. In that spirit, I'd like to share now with you some poems written in the hope of speaking truth and finding ways to justice, to beginning again. This first poem is really about matters of perspective, about how we see each other, how we connect and honor one another's humanity or fail to, our limitations around that. About the white male gaze for me, That's what it boils down to. This poem was published in The Atlantic this past summer, and it is called Other Ways to Say Blackface. Take the cork, he said. We were out walking. It made me feel free, he said. I stopped walking. I said, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Take the cork. Do you mean blackface? Yes, that's right, he said. It's natural to want to be different, to want to feel free. Oh, white boy. Oh, Lord. Oh, tell me, sir. Yes, tell me how you want to feel free. Oh, boy, here on my street. Tell me, do I make you free? Am I your new black face? I mean, my black face next to yours, my black mouth on your mouth. Does that free you from your trim white body like that cork do? Am I just your little thick, black, sweet corkscrew? You know how it works, he said. After your parents have opened the bottle of wine, take one and burn the bottom. Take one, I said. One what? I said. Oh, the cork, I said. Oh, right. Oh, white boy. Oh, Lord. Oh, the street fell away. I'd let you put your hands on my body in both of our wanting. And now you say blackface, and you say free, and you say natural, and you look at me and you say free again and burn the bottom. And before I can conjure your young white hands with a match burned cork, smudging your face till it feels black and free, I'm afraid of how much you don't know. And I am afraid of how much I can stand. Oh, white boy. Oh, Lord. Oh, take your cork, put it back in the bottle. Yes, stop up everything left of that strange nostalgia. Stop looking to feel free. In my skin, give it back to me. Without the burn, without the cork. My skin looks to you like the freedom your skin is. Thank you. So this poem is for Emmett tonight, and really for George Floyd, and for Dante Wright, and especially tonight for Dante Wright. It's called Which Lives Matter. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. Quote from the news: after Oklahoma City, Aurora, Colorado, Charleston, South Carolina, Parkland, Florida. It goes on. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident. They found the shooter and arrested him without incident, and arrested him without incident, and arrested him without incident. That one was harder to read tonight than I expected. I think it's just rage. and fear and frustration and indignity at the injustice. But anyway, so this next poem, I talked earlier about matters of perspective, and I think, so much of injustice is to do with bias and the ways that the law fails to accommodate for it. And I'm owning an ache of mine that bias created, but then also created some bias. This is a poem called "To All the White Girls Who," because the idea of Carolyn Bryant, the woman who turned Emmett Till in, still drives me out of my mind. She's going to die safe from this, and we all deserve reckonings. And maybe for Officer Potter too, I guess. I'm realizing the woman who murdered Dante Wright. To all the white girls who made me feel ashamed of my body, it made me feel confused about how and why I exist in your space. I hope you have lived in fear of this poem. I hope you have been afraid I would name you and shame you. You did me such violence. You didn't mean, you meant, girl, you mean. I mean, whether you meant to or not, you made me a murderer of my tiny Black girl joys. They could not gain purchase in your smoothly white space. I killed pieces of myself to survive you. And now you are listening. You want to learn. You see me. You hear me. So here, I say, resurrect my pieces, gal, or get your lesson. I do not care who you are now. I cannot stand you to survive the world without some record of your hateful gaze. It's simple. Your children should know you carelessly hurt Black people. And hey, if you raise them right, they might think less of you. But listen, I don't even know how to want to wish you well. So part of justice is just telling the story completely, making sure that everyone's got a clear picture. And as I think about these, being a Black woman in a Southern body in American space right now, I began to wonder what it would feel like or sound like to write the voice of the land. So I dreamt up this woman named Rosie, and I put her, as ever in my life, in Mississippi. I am a Tennessee woman, by the way, just in case that was mysterious. But I put her in Mississippi, and I named her Rosie because, of course, that's her name. This is Rosie 1 in the voice of the land of the South. Call me a cradle and a nest. Call me Mississippi. I am everything wrong with Eden, and I am every hope for it, before and after they fall. Say, feed me, Mississippi. Say, rest me, Mississippi. See this, my fist. See this, my raging growth. Say, can't see to can't see, Mississippi. Watch me grow these can't see beans. I mean, white beans and salt pork gone smooth, sweet almost, and with pepper. Slick down your tongue, can't see, to stop the belly from knocking her backbone, can't see for a spell. Say, oh God, help me eat to survive. Say, oh Lord, let this spoon sustain me, this cup lip holding its small covenant. I will eat today. Yes, I ate them all. I eat them all up. I have let the kudzu grow and grow and grow, and this green plant adores me, adorns me, and I let it live and eat things people try to keep safe. This house, ha! Its foundations, nothing. I let it eat these black bodies, yes. Watch me breed a mosquito, yes, that will eat and eat and eat a man alive. And yet let live and live and live. Rosie, too. Do a sound, turn the lights on. Did the light bend across her body long enough to take the measure of her there? Do wood keep a taste? How much Southern wood carries the taste of Black girl thigh sweat? What wood wouldn't want it? Ooh, land and flesh. Ooh, wood and water. Happened that I sag all polished under her bent knee. Happened that I fill up on her shoe-footed press and sway. Happened that her pain red hands stay singing blood into my waters. Happened that I need Miss Rosie, don't it? She my victual, don't it? Her sweet funk season my vitals, sustain them. Can a place have a preference? Lord, no, this place ain't like God, even-sided. Yea, though I do eat of her toil aches me, still and all. All right, so this poem just came out in this March's Oxford American Food edition. So speaking to the many hats that one wears. So you've been in my civil rights, social justice, American history questions hat. And this is moving into a food iteration of that space before I veer way out before we close. This poem is called A Sustainable Call and Response, and it begins with an excerpt from Van R. Newkirk II's brilliant Atlantic article, The Great Land Robbery. But what happened to Black landowners in the South, and particularly in the Delta, is distinct and was propelled not only by economic change, but also by white racism and local white power. A war waged by deed of title has dispossessed 98% of Black agricultural landowners in America. Let me say that again. A war waged by a deed of title has dispossessed 98% of Black agricultural landowners in America. They have lost 12 million acres over the past century. But even that statement falsely consigns the losses to long ago history. In fact, the losses mostly occurred within living memory from the 1950s onward. Today, except for a handful of farmers like the Scotts who have been able to keep or get back some land, Black people in this most productive corner of the Deep South own almost nothing of the bounty under their feet. A sustainable call and response. What are you asking us to want? What are you expecting our bodies will remember? Here, let me put it another way. You say farm to, I say field hand. You say fresh produce. I say strange fruit. You say back to the basics, back to the land. I say return. Return unto us our stolen acres. Give us our land back again. How shall we revisit a stolen thing? What harvest invites us home in our hands' blood still soaked to every now decorative plow? Our pastures with a pen stroke turn to someone else's flock? I say no. I say we have left your not yours farms for seats at tables. Our ability to sustain ourselves is our sustenance. Your sustainables come always and too often at our expense. And well, priority is as priority does. So call me a resource, sugar. Put me on your list of things you hope endure. I said I'd read one more poem, but I'm not sure. I will. I'll do it just for fun. This is from my poetry collection, Lucy Negro. You've just heard poems all from my next collection that I'm working on, but I'm going to read an old one that I wrote imagining writing into the voice of the dark lady from Shakespeare's sonnets, and inspired by questions about my own ancestry and many of my multiple loves and a white male perspective on the Black female body, and grappling with that from my own voice. Lucy's exeat saith that. This exeat saith that I am wild, and that I live by it, and that I like it, like the money, and the witness, and the grotesque, and the yes, yes. This exeat saith that I am not a partridge or a ruby. I'm a potato, a beetroot, not a precious bird or jewel, but a dirt-dug tube. Wrestle me, rub me all over, and I will muddle your interiors with flecks of brown earth. You will sigh at your soiled hands, and then you will put them in your pockets to pay for it. This exeat saith that you will come again to scour my body with your worthy emollient palm creases, because I am that round, strange colored victual. And further, this examinate saith that you will dirt grit your nails to gather me up, and by God, we will both be sustained. By God, if you warm and eat me, I will nourish and fatten you. So it really becomes a question of how we respect each other, how we share space, and how we avoid feeling solely like resources to one another. That this question of justice sort of is anchored in that to me. So again, what does justice look like in the face of so many grievances, with so much time between original sins and their unanswered reverberations? Good grief. In the face of so much time between the original sins and their unanswered reverberations. Does it look like reparations? Maybe. I don't even know how to begin to have that conversation. What I do know is that restorative, reparative justice for me would look like truth telling, whole truth telling, and truth hearing. And that sounds to me a lot like a conversation. And I'm looking forward to having one with you all now. If I can turn it back over to Zoe.
Thank you, Caroline. You're not turning it over to me at all. We're keeping it with you, but
with me, but helping me moderate all of the incoming.
I will certainly help you. Wonderful. There is a question from the audience, and I wanted to start with a question, I guess, myself. Well, I'm giving everyone a moment to sort of ruminate and type maybe. But I was so struck. I'm going to read this line here that you read from your poem. You said, this was in the to all the white girls who, you said, the character says, I killed pieces of myself to survive you. And you know, that is just incredibly painful line, and succinct, and it really brought me to Toni Morrison's book The Bluest Eye, and how people breed love, you know, she ends up insane because that's all she can do, because she's killed so many pieces of herself. The world kills them. And I think as painful as all of that is, that sort of speaking of truth as you close, speaking of truth as the beginning of a space, creating a space for justice, is something that is painful, and that you've taken upon yourself, not only to be sane, but to speak that truth. And I you know, obviously I admire that tremendously, and I think it takes a lot of energy on your part and on many people's parts who are speaking truth right now. But you know, you also talked about constructive shame. I'm sort of rolling this into a question.
I love this. Thank you.
So you know, this sort of like facing this truth, which is very difficult, and then having some form of constructive shame. And I was wondering if you wanted to talk about where that shame lies. The shame lies in the person who's killing pieces of themselves. Thus the innocent young Black girl, perhaps Piccola Breedlove, perhaps your character. And then the constructive shame on the parts of those who have to be survived. So is that a question?
Yeah, it is a question. It's certainly a conversation. It's the beginning of a really valuable conversation. I think one, thank you for acknowledging. I mean, I think acknowledging people's labor is so precious. And I think, you know, that poem, it's complicated for me to read because, you know, so many of the most important people in my life are white women that I love very much. And some of whom are people that I wrote that poem to. And I, you know, I think that one of the complicated things, that was in another conversation with some students earlier today. And I was thinking about how, you know, I'm 33 years old. I'm an old millennial. And even still, assimilation was the offered survival mode. And I think that I grapple with the fact that two things are true. One, I don't know that any of the young white women around me knew that their manifesting of their expectations was going to cause me to kill parts of myself, but that doesn't make it less true. And then figuring out what responsibility that is relative to like emotional truth is complicated, right? And then like, you know, separate from that question, wait, see, I told you I needed to write these questions down because I was going to lose the train of thought trying to answer them in order. But you mentioned, Piccola Breedlove, the question of shame and healthy shame. So I think one of the things that's interesting is like, I'm very lucky that I have a mother who just loved me with like wild abandon. And thought that I was the best. And sometimes I felt to my detriment because she didn't teach me how to fit myself into certain kinds of white molds that would have made me feel emotionally safe or young. But I feel shame now as an adult that I silenced parts of my Black self younger. I'm like, oh my God, why did you do that to her? You know, I think I feel shame about that, but I didn't feel shame at the time. I felt weary and exhausted by needing to fit things that I wasn't born into. But I think in terms of constructive shame, you know, this is going to sound, I mean, maybe it doesn't sound extreme anymore. The world's gone wild, but I think the first thing I think is the Nazis. Like, I don't know if they felt bad or not, but the world saw the footage from the liberation of the camps. Like, everyone saw what they did and they knew to be ashamed. And it, you know, and it's part of what facilitated the efficacy of like the Nuremberg trials, of like monetary reparations to Israel. Like, I don't know how they felt about it, but they had the decency to be ashamed that everyone had seen it. And I don't mean to laugh about that, but I think that shame can be governing a principle that is useful for people that are not morally interested in change but understand social repercussions. Because it's for example, like, I don't know if in this country I'll ever see eye to eye about certain questions of equity, but I'd like there to be like systems in place that engender shame in people when they do certain things, regardless of how they morally feel about them, to protect my life, to protect the lives of my Black friends, Black sons and daughters. You know, like, I think that there's I think shame can be motivating. For and it's not an ideal motivator, but short of consensual reality, it is a functional one. And so that's what I think about when you ask that question, or when you pose that line of inquiry.
Yes. And I was thinking as you're answering it that there's a certain part of the answer, tell me if this is on track. Part of the answer is that shame can become constructive as it is communal. So when the Nazis were, exposed, then they suddenly had to become shame-filled. But as long as it was hidden, it could no longer be constructive.
That's right. Well, I think that before it's hidden, it's not shame.
Right.
Like, I think that that's the whole shame, or maybe this is now this is like a separate conversation to have, like, with my books, but like, maybe there's types of shame, but I don't know that there's shame. I mean, I guess you can have spiritual shame, like between you and the Lord or whatever, and then like the lines between shame and guilt. But I think shame has a public facing function that is sort of requisite, right? Like, I don't know that I feel ashamed for things I've done unless people know about them. I can feel guilt for things I've done because I know better. But I think shame is to do with knowing better and being caught, I think, or in my mind, that when I use shame, that's what I mean. And I think that's part of, I mean, it's part of why these questions about comparing the human rights violations subsequent to chattel slavery in the Americas relative to something like what happened in Europe during World War II. It's complicated to have a conversation about them because people say, well, the Holocaust is unprecedented, never again, which of course, I mean, but I think the scale of horror, I'm not sure whether or not it's different because we don't have video cameras. We didn't have photographs. I don't know that if there hadn't been cameras in the bellies of the Middle Passage boats, that we wouldn't be having a different conversation, right? And so I think that, like, when we think about Southern shame and the lack of it, I'm like, maybe it's because we didn't have a record. I mean, I think that if these people had to answer for what it looked like in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in the bowels of these ships where people were just dying and chained, ankle to neck, we'd be, the conversation would look different. So yeah, shame's an interesting motivator.
And I think, this kind of threads neatly into one of the questions that was just asked from the audience, and that I was sort of ruminating on myself as you talked about Brian's Grocery. So someone asked here, in the spirit of remembering, what should the historical monument look like today? Who is celebrated and how? Wow.
Oh my God. I did not anticipate that this would be, I mean, I should have, I like to think of myself as somebody with some kind of like perspicacity and insight in the world, but somehow I did not anticipate that this would be the question that was asked of me after this article, like sort of for the rest of time. But maybe I shouldn't say that, it hasn't even been a year, so it's completely reasonable. What should be done with the monuments in the sake of remembering and in the spirit of justice? That's what I heard from that question. And I think, context is the first word that comes to mind. We have to figure out how to put things into context. They can't just sit there unexamined in the public where anybody can just walk up to them and like feel and impose their feelings about it. Like, it can't be that there's something in a square where somebody who's the descendant of some Confederate general can just like go up and look at that for fun, while the descendant of somebody who that man owned has to walk up and look at it with trauma, and have that tension and that dichotomy like unexamined where the monument sits. Because I think that figuring out, how we provide the context, I can't be the arbiter of that. I think that there have to be like important, thoughtful councils with thought leaders in different communities. And it's funny, I will laughingly say, it's rare that you'll hear me talk about states' rights. Because I think in a lot of ways, like, when it comes to like voting and certain kinds of suffrage and equity in this country, like we really need to make that uniform across all 50 United States. But when it comes to like how we navigate what we do with monuments to anyone, not just dead Confederates, we have to, it's going to be a matter of the demographics and the tone of the people of this shared space. I do think that no matter what happens to them, context is critical. I think that acknowledging, I think as Americans, what I can say is I agree that my goal is to like, it's just like with a physician, like first do no harm. I want to hurt. If a monument hurts Americans, actually, I don't even know if I can say that, because like there's a world where I could imagine like Martin Luther King monument hurting certain kinds of Americans. So, you have this, like, you have the tolerance of paradox, like constant, or the paradox of tolerance constantly aches and irks me, because I'm going, if you are going to be a tolerant person, you have to be tolerant even of the intolerant. So then the question just becomes like, what do you, we have to make sure that if these monuments stay, like this man owned his children, right? Like that should be at the base of the Jefferson Memorial. Do you know what I mean? Like he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he also owned his children. And he owned his wife's sister. Like, we just have to say that that's true, because it is. It's the truth telling. It's the complete picture. And I think if we want to keep it up after we've written down that this man owned his children, that's a different question. And that's probably very American of us. And then I think that there are certain other kinds of monuments that like the Confederate monuments that are erected just to reify like Jim Crow terror, in the 30s and 40s and 20s. And like those should go in a museum that's dedicated to American human rights violations, in my opinion. Like, I don't think that they belong up. I think that the ones that happened in real time, like there were people that were from Alabama that died, that were from America and born in Alabama, who then became traitors to the country, and died traitors, but were born Alabamian Americans, whose families tried to erect monuments to whose subsequently then again American families tried to erect monuments to their traitorous family members. And I think people need to figure out how to grieve their dead, and that's a separate conversation in some ways. But again, those monuments need to say that they were traitors. And then if you want to keep them up after you've said that they were traitors, then that's we just have to say all of the truth all the time. Context.
Yeah, that's great. And complexity, allow the complexity.
Yeah, we have to. We're the only, we're one of the crazy hard truths of America. I was going to say it's a gift, but it's a hard truth because it's based in genocide, right? That like the bulk of people from the United States, like none of us can claim this by blood. Not one of us, like hardly any of us. Unless you are part of the like first peoples of this country. The only thing that unites us is a document that freaking Thomas Jefferson wrote and all those old white guys signed. But like, we are united by ideals alone, not blood, not geography. And so we are a weird, complicated country in that. And we are all family of choice, for better or worse. So figuring out how to grapple with that as we acknowledge one another more fully is just complicated.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, looking at our questions, and talk about another more possibly positive way of uniting people across things. This comes from Leslie Rybovich, who's a religion professor here. She says, "Can you talk a little bit about the role of food, cooking, and/or eating in poetry?" Of course you can. And the connection between recipes and writing. What does a focus on food and eating allow you to do or say?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I'm sitting in front of my grandmother's cookbooks right now. You know, I've said often and written sometimes that writing a recipe and writing a poem are very similar exercises to me because they do a lot of the same work, right? Like you are sitting there going, okay, so what are the pieces, like the ingredients that, like, what are the things, like when I'm writing a poem, I first assemble artifacts. Like I'm like, what are the concrete pieces that go in this poem? And then, you know, how do I organize them? Like, what's the order of information? What's the order of receiving information that the person needs to like get the flavor of this, right? To create the final product, whether that's like the takeaway from a poem or the actual dish by the end of a recipe. It's like, what are the artifacts, like what are the ingredients and in what order, and then how do I like explain the method of like commingling these things for the person that I wrote this for to like experience it in the way I meant it, right? So for me, they are very similar exercises, the recipe writing, the poetry writing. And you know, with food and poetry, and I'm going to say this wrong because I've been trying to explain it forever, but like raise your hand if you have synesthesia and then tell me if you've been able to explain it to anyone. I have synesthesia. Okay. So, and I have a couple of iterations of it. So trying to figure out like, you know, you experience a feeling and then it comes out as a poem or it comes out as a recipe, right? Like it's like, you know, or it comes out as an article or it comes out as a work of fiction. I think that, you know, and then for me, the food part comes into it because I think recipes tell stories, food tells stories, like the intention by which like you prepare a meal for someone you're in love with, you prepare a meal for someone you love who's ill, you prepare a meal for your grandmother who like taught you how to cook it and you hope you do it as well. Those all tell different stories, right? And they carry, and recipes carry inherited memory, and they're a way, they're not an oral history, but a different retained sort of folk history or of and so I think like that's a little bit of a call and response, a little bit of like an ongoing curated exercise. So I don't know. I think that they're both storytelling devices that have just quite shared functions in my life, if that makes sense.
I love that. That is wonderful. And I know I had heard a number of people who had gotten your cookbook right away and were yeah, wonderful.
Thank you. Whoever got it. Thank you. If you have it. Thank you. Thank you.
So, okay, another question from the audience. This is following up on that. A book recommendation. Daniel Clausen says, I know now to go out and read your work. Who are some other poets you're reading? Who else should we know about and be reading?
Oh, me.
Yes.
Okay. Who else should you be reading? Well, of my soul canon, you need to be reading Lucille Clifton. You need to be reading obviously Langston Hughes. You need to be reading Frank O'Hara, and you need to be reading, oh God, I'm gonna miss everybody, Jack Spicer, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Maya Angelou. But then of my friends, you need to be reading Nate Marshall, and you need to be reading Dinez Smith, and you need to be reading Morgan Parker. You need to be reading Mahogany Brown, and you need to be reading Abraham Smith, crazy Appalachian guy who I love, who's with my publisher, Third Man. You know, you need to be reading the great Americans who are alive: Natasha Trethewey, Sharon Olds, Jory Graham. I'm sorry, I'm giving like a long list. And then Terrence Hayes, I should say, Patricia Smith. Those two, Terrence Hayes and Patricia Smith, of the people who are alive. And then my mentors, Beth Ann Fennelly and Derek Harrell. Derek's book, Ropes, and Beth Ann's book, The Tender Hooks, they're both my professors at the University of Mississippi. Yeah, those works are very intimately important to me, and they're both great American poets. So yeah, that's a massive list. But if you were to buy one book first, I would say buy Wind in a Box by Terrence Hayes.
We might just have
to and the complete works of Lucille Clifton. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Awesome.
Such a nerd. I'm such a nerd. And obviously Shakespeare. Like, I didn't even say that. The complete works of William Shakespeare is the most important book of poetry there is, in my mind, to me, and period. But yeah.
Wonderful. We may have to collaborate. Daniel and I may have to collaborate and create this list and share it out with everyone. So, well, we are up at 8 o'clock, and I know that there are some questions we haven't answered here, but if there's anything, Caroline, that you want to answer that came up on the list that you can see, or whether there's something else you have thought of here at the end that you want to say before, you know, everyone goes on with their evenings. And
let me say, can you elaborate more about synesthesia? I don't personally have that, but I find it fascinating. It's hard for me to even talk about not in the time we have left. I'm so sorry, anonymous attendee, but I will try and write about it. Then I will share out the link once I have figured it out. And then Randy Naylor, oh gosh, these are big questions to try and integrate into the last moments. I think maybe what I will say in parting is, you know, and this is something I said to you at the beginning, this has been a really complicated few days. I mean, it's been a complicated few weeks, a complicated several months, a complicated year and a half. But I think, you know, figuring out how to come into an academic, thoughtful space with people to talk about the question of justice after Dante Wright's murder was very unsettling for me. And maybe unsettling is not enough of a word. It was heartbreaking for me. And I think what I would ask in parting is that we all not only hold a hope for an America that does better, but I want us to all feel grief for the ways that America has been failing. Because I think that, like, we don't collectively share the grief enough. And I think that that is part of why the change has been so slow. And so I would say, like, let this incapacitate you. Let it be as terrible as it is. And then once you have gotten up off your sickbed, let's like cast about for a real remedy, because this is not acceptable. We can't live like this. We can't. I mean, we aren't living like this. People are dying like this. So that's it's my closing thought, but it's a hope. I'm saying that in a hope that we can find a way that's different. I say it, if I didn't hope that we could find a way that's different, I wouldn't ask y'all to feel this thing. I'm asking you to feel it because it's the growing pain. It's the hope pain. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because what you're saying is feel it, talk it, think it, keep talking it, do it together.
Yeah.
And that's all we have. Those are our tools. So I thank you so much for that and for spending this evening with us and for writing
Oh,
your
this was such a treat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. And I will see you on campus. And Caroline, someday when the pandemic's over, maybe we will have you.
Yes, I gotta come up. Yes, please.
You're not far away from us, and we would love that very much. So thank you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone. Thank you all.